Hello everyone, welcome back to our Japanese Sounds. And today's video is specifically directed at all those among you, my viewers, who have not really ever had the occasion to actually graduate from looking at videos on YouTube and really taking the time and also, of course, the money to get yourself your own vinyl records of Japanese music. We've already done a few videos about where to buy Japanese records. I've also done a video on 5 basic tips on buying those records, but I've never talked about what is actually my process in choosing what albums to buy, how much am I willing to spend into each one of them, how to choose the right auction to bid on or the right listing on Discogs. Those are all questions that are not easy to answer and that require some amount of time to learn by yourself. And hopefully, with this video, you will have sort of a jump start on how to actually look at all the albums of not only Japanese music, of course, but that is the topic of this channel. And hopefully you will have gained some time compared to what you would have taken if you had done that all by yourself. So in this video, we're going to very simply talk about how to choose an album that you want to buy, then how to analyze that particular album, how to try to weigh the pros and cons of buying it versus another album, and to try and guess what price you want to put into that album. Then we're going to look at, when you actually buy it, what to look for. Of course, we've already talked about that, but it will be a quick recap on what to look at when you want to actually buy this album in particular and how long to wait. And then we're going to talk about selling the album, if ever you have the need or just the want to do such a thing after a certain amount of time. Anyway, without further ado, let's get started with the first question, which, in my opinion, is the easiest of all. What album to choose to purchase? And to me, the answer is very straightforward. You need to absolutely only buy albums that you personally enjoy, albums that you love listening to, that you love the cover art for, that you love the history of. There is no one single way of enjoying a particular album, and it's not only enjoying it through listening to it. You can enjoy it for a variety of reasons. But what's most important is you need to love the album. You need to love the idea of owning the physical copy of the album. And that is because if you never get around to selling it, you need to just be happy with the idea that you have the amount of money that you put into it in the form of this record, as opposed to having it in your bank accounts. Because we need to face it, selling records is quite hard and it's not as liquid as many other collectibles. So you need to be pretty careful with the idea that you might not be able to sell your records easily, at least not for the amount that you paid for them. That being said, there is a bit more to it than just picking the albums that you like. First, you need to look at what types of music you enjoy listening to. And once you've enjoyed the different areas of music that you like, try for each, let's say, subgenre. Let's say only looking at Japanese ambient, only new age, only J-funk. So for each of those genres, what are the most iconic albums? What are the albums that everyone will know, or at least most people will know? And among them, which ones are the most expensive? Which ones are the rarest? Which ones have the most glamour behind them? You need to get a precise idea of how each album is perceived by everyone and how people relate to those albums. Maybe you have a very strong connection to a particular album, but it's only you. And we all know that when it comes to collectibles, one big part of how much people are willing to spend is how connected they feel to the album. That's the only reason why Plastic Love, like just the name Plastic Love, carries such a huge value. And it's you can see the same for albums like Magical. You have a few individual city pop albums to which people feel extremely connected, and it drives really the price very high. So you need to track how people are feeling with respect to those albums, and you should make a choice depending on how personal you feel, but also how other people feel, because it can make your life easier to sell the album afterwards if people really enjoy the album on an emotional level. And lastly, a third factor into what record to choose when you want to buy one is what album do you think is currently not as popular as it should be? And once you get enough experience listening to different albums of one genre, you will pretty easily realize that, hey, this album is very good, but it's not popular at all. Maybe it should be more popular. And it's exactly what happened to the Katsumi Hori project. Completely under the radar for years, only started to resurface and become popular in, let's say, 1 year's time or something. And between, let's say, 2019 and 2020, the price has risen from only a few thousand yen to easily 15 to 20,000. So that's how you can, like, on an individual level, find what album is currently not as popular as it should be, based on what people are listening to, your own experience, and perhaps albums or artists that are rare enough that they aren't currently popular, but might be if the right YouTuber posts a video about it. So the second step is analyzing the album on a wide range of criteria. And the first one should be a fundamental analysis of the album. How popular is the album right now? Why is it popular? What type of people are listening to the album? Are they listening to a lot of similar music? Are they big music listener, or are they just casual listeners who only listen to the album, you know, when they have a bit of free time? Are they the kind of people who put the album like as a kind of background music when they study or do something else? Or are they the kind of people that like to listen to the album because they are, let's say, DJs or music aficionados? Are they looking to sample the album? So you have a wide range of people who could listen to the album. And let's say in the case of Cassiopeia, you could say that it's popular because Cassiopeia is one of the major Japanese fusion bands out there. It has always been popular, and it was popular even more than 40 years ago. Some of Cassiopeia's albums, like Minjams, actually saw releases outside of Japan. So when you combine all those factors, you can get an idea of why an album is popular. So when you understand the basic fundamentals behind this particular album, or the one that you're trying to look into right now, you can move on to the technical analysis, as I like to call it. And it's actually crunching the numbers, not only on Discogs, but Discogs is a pretty good start to look at how many people want the album, just the number of people who want the release on Discogs. Is it 10, 100, 1,000? It will make the album get a very different profile based on that number. But then how many people actually own the release? I know that some people on Discogs put it as if they actually have the album, but don't. But you can just use the ratio of want to have to get a pretty good idea of, is the album owned by a lot of people? You can also look at what's the sales history on Discogs. Has it been sold a lot of times since, let's say, 2015? Are there copies for sales on Discogs right now? It's a pretty good indicator to see if an album is more popular than copies are available. It's a good supply to demand analyzer. For instance, in this case, if there are 5 albums on Discogs available right now, it shows you that there is more supply than demand at the current price that supply is set at. But if there are no copies for sale, like, it pushes the price much higher because it gives a lot of room for the seller to put a new price on the album, and then the buyer will have no other opportunity than to buy the only album for sale or not to. Anyway, so once you've done, you know, a little bit of search on Discogs, you can also try to look at, are there similar releases to that one? Of course, the first album by Cassiopeia has gotten many other releases, even as an LP. It was released with the blue cover. It was also released with the same cover, but a different label, 3 years later. So you should try to compare all the different releases of the album and which ones are most valuable, or the one you're looking into the most valuable out of all those that are available. In this case, you could say that yes, if it's the first pressing with this cover, it's usually the most desired form for this record by Cassiopeia. So once you've done that, you can move on to look at Yahoo Auctions. What's the sales history on the album? Does it come up on auction often? And what is often? Is it once every day, once every week, month, year? When it comes up on auction, are there a lot of bids? What type of buyers usually win the auction? What type of condition is the album in when it is on auction? Is the price very volatile? Is there like a simple to triple factor from one auction to the other? All those all those elements allow you to have a pretty good idea of what the price of the record is at this point in time and what its basic history has been for the last few years. Once you have that, you can have a pretty solid guess at how much you want to put into that album in what condition. Another factor you should look at is, has the album been reissued? And I mean recently. Of course, in the case of Cassiopeia, there have been contemporary releases of the album, different releases in the 1979 to 83 era. But have there been recent releases? Were they big releases? Were they limited to 500, 1,000 copies? Has the fact that it has been reissued lowered the price of the original? Maybe it has made the price higher because now more people know about the album than before. Is the reissue easy to find? Is it pretty expensive? How expensive it is compared to the original? In some cases, the reissue is more expensive than the original. Just look at something like the Big Wave, like Tatsuro Yamashita's Big Wave, a 30-year anniversary reissue. That type of album is actually more expensive as a reissue than the original. So look at all that in sort of a contextual way, and particular reissues are a good indicator of how many people actually want to buy the album, even if it's a recent reissue, versus they actually want the original no matter what the price is. And once you have all those elements, you can move on to more of the speculation phase of the analysis. And that is where you put your own grain of salt into the equation and try to guess, basically. With all this data that I found, do I think that the album is underpriced right now? Do I think it's at the right price? Do I think that given the supply that exists and the number of people interested in the album, do I think the price is going to stay the same for a large period of time? Is it possible that many copies will get to the markets over the next 10 years? For instance, for an album that has been popular for 10 years, it's less likely that many copies will just pop up because people have had the time to find the album in their attics. So for the longer an album has been popular and expensive for, the more confident you can feel that there aren't going to be many more copies getting onto the market anytime soon. On the other hand, if the album has just recently gotten popular, well, people are going to search their attic, find their copies and put them on the market, or buy list them at the nearest record shop. So you can put all this speculative guesswork into your mental calculation of how much do you think the album is worth, and also is it worth your time and the money at its current valuation. Alright, so let's imagine that you have found the right album that you want, that you have also done the right amount of analysis and have decided of an exact price point you want the album for, or have decided that you just want the album no matter the price as long as it's around its current one. So then you move on to actually going to websites, whether it be auction websites like Yahoo Auctions or even eBay in some cases, although I don't recommend eBay in most cases. Whether it be Discogs, whether it be websites of independent stores like Face Records or Discunion. So you try to look around all these websites and you try to find copies for sale. So what do? Well, the first and most important point is look at the condition of the record. How do you factor in condition into the price that you want to give for the record? And that is really depending on your profile as a buyer. Or are you only looking for top copies, pristine, complete with insert, obi? In that case, you should be prepared to pay a nice premium, even over a generally excellent copy. If you want really a perfect one, then you must be prepared to pay a big premium, but also you will get a premium down the line because other people are prepared to pay that. And premiums only go up over time as the album gets more expensive. But what about if it's the other way around? What if the album is not in such good condition? What if it's missing the obi? What if it's missing the insert? What if the bottom of the jacket is split? You have a lot of ways in which condition can affect price, and it's pretty difficult even as an experienced buyer. And I would say that after a few years I've started to be a bit more experienced at how to value an individual record given its condition. But one thing that you need to keep in mind is there are fewer buyers for albums in poor condition and more buyers for records in great condition. So keep that in mind when you want to spend money. My personal recommendation is, if you want something that is the most solid investment, just buy things that are in near mint condition. But if you're looking to be as efficient as possible with your money, it's possible that sometimes you can find great deals for an album that is in great condition, both jackets and disc, but doesn't have the OB, for instance. How much, like what percentage of the price should you take off for it not having the OB? And then again, it depends on who wants to buy the album. Is the bulk of people wanting to buy the album particularly caring about condition of the album? Do they just want, a nice copy to listen to? Do they want a perfect one? Are they audiophile buyers or just casual buyers? It's so many factors to take into account, but trust me, with experience, with years and years of doing that, you will start to naturally have this sort of implanted into your mind, and you will naturally know how much to take off for a missing OB. Maybe it will be 15%, maybe it will be 10%, because you know that the album is so rare that people basically don't care whether it has the OB or not. Maybe it will be 30% because the album is extremely common and people can very easily find one in good condition. They don't have to wait to find one in better condition. So with all those rules taken into account, you need also to look at the seller's history. Do they sell a lot of records? When they sell them, what type of condition do they put on most of their records? If they say that the record is in great condition, but they say that about all of the records, you don't tend to trust that as much as if they are generally conservative about the condition of the records, but for this one, say that it's in good condition. Also, you might want to care about whether the seller is a store or just an individual selling their personal collection. If it's an individual who says, yeah, I bought the album 40 years ago, but I never listened to it, that's a great indicator that the disc might be in perfect condition, if the seller is not lying, of course. Whereas a store generally doesn't have much time to do an actual listen through the album, and they will just do a quick visual check. But sometimes an album can look in great condition visually, but be completely broken down by, a blunt needle or something. And that you can't see just through a visual check. So anyway, we're getting pretty far out in details here. But remember, one, to take into account condition. Every single factor is important into deciding your price. And second, try to look at the seller and whether you can trust the rating that they give for this particular album. And most importantly, don't hesitate to wait. I know that it's very, very hard once you've found an album that is pretty rare and it is in the condition that you want and it's falling just outside of the price range that you set for yourself. It's pretty easy to just, jump the fence and put the extra amount of money into the album. But remember, it's always possible to find another copy of the album, unless it's so incredibly rare that it will just never pop up again, but it generally always does. So try to think about, why can't you wait just another 6 months, another 3 months, sometimes just another month to buy the album in the condition that you want for the price that you want? You will feel so much more fulfilled to have had the patience to find the exactly right auction for you or the right listing of Discogs. So keep that in mind before buying anything. All right, so finally you have found an album that you want. You have analyzed it through and through, and you have actually went the distance and bought it. So what's the next step? Well, to me as a collector, the next step is just enjoying the album and knowing that I got it for a decent price at the moment I bought it for. You can never control the way prices move up or down. That is just how markets work. But you need to be just happy with yourself, with your purchase at the moment you did it. There is no reason to beat yourself up over not predicting that the market was going to go up or down. Oh, I should have bought this record instead of that one. Or I should have waited because prices went down afterwards. You just need to be happy with the purchase you made at this point in time when you actually did it. Anyway, perhaps you have the desire to sell your album after you've had it for a certain period of time. And that is completely up to you. There is nothing wrong with selling your album. But something to take into account is if you're a new seller, you're going to have to price your album lower than other outlets if you want people to buy your copy instead of another one. So let's say you have to put it 20% lower than anywhere else in order to get it sold. You also have to take into account, let's say 10% selling fees. Let's say through Discogs it's 10%. Through Yahoo Auctions it's also 10%. So whatever you do, you're already at 20 plus 10 plus shipping fees in some cases. And even if you make the buyer pay for shipping, you have to provide the cardboard for packaging the vinyl. You have to provide the bubble wrap. You have to do all that work yourself, and that work is not free. You have to value your own time. So in the end, be pretty careful that even if you got an album that is worth, let's say, $100 for $80, you might think that you could make a profit, but when you actually try and sell it for $100, you will only net maybe $70 to $75, and you will be in the red, despite you paying the album for less than it was worth. So that is the first thing to keep in mind. The other issue when it comes to selling a record is trying to time the market when to exactly sell it. So you can do that by, for instance, looking at how many sellers are selling the album right now on Discogs. The more competition you have, the harder it will be for you to sell your album, and the lower you will have to set your price. How often is the album getting sold on Yahoo Auctions these days? You can try to take advantage of, let's say, a lower frequency of this particular album selling to bring more attention to your particular copy and maybe get a higher price on it. You also need to take into account, is the album popular right now? Are people sharing it on YouTube, on Discord? Are the views on YouTube, or the number of comments currently rising? Or is it not particularly looked at right now? So all those factors can be a pretty good, in general, pretty good indicators of whether or not you want to sell your album at this current point in time. But same thing goes for buying, and same thing goes for selling. You can't really time the market for anything. You can just try to, if you're not in a rush to sell, of course. If you are in a rush, then tough luck. But if you have all the time in the world, you should try to find the moments where there is a lot of hype, where people are suddenly spending more and more money on the album, and try to sell your album right before the hype dies down and becomes harder for you to, unload your copy. Of course, it's pretty hard to do as a new seller. You also need that experience of knowing when exactly can you feel that there is hype around a certain album. All those are very difficult questions, and the world of not just collecting, but also tipping your toes into investing in not just records it's pretty difficult. And the world of vinyl records is pretty tough due to how, it's not easy to find good records in good conditions, and people will pay to know that they have something that is truly in your means. And you can take advantage of that. The market is still pretty young, and right now it's somewhat easy to find pretty cheap albums on Yahoo Auctions and sell them for higher on Discogs. It's not gonna stay that way forever, or maybe it is, who knows. It really depends on how, if in 20 years people will still be listening to city pop, to Japanese ambient music, and it will depend on if people are actually buying records, or are they doing more than just listening to them. It's way too soon to tell, but if I had to take a bet, I would say that if you're buying records right now, chances are you will be in a very good spot in 20 years when it comes to this hobby. Just a few words about the world of collectibles right now is pretty much on fire. If you're into any other collectibles than vinyl records, you will know that everything is on the rise because of tough market conditions, a lot of uncertainty. Even gold, silver are pretty uncertain assets right now, and people are turning back to things that they emotionally feel close to. And vinyl records are one of those. It's pretty easy to touch. It has a certain history behind it, and who knows, maybe Japanese records will be the next thing to skyrocket, but I wouldn't count on it. I hope sincerely that in the next 50 years we just see a continuous slow increase of the value. That would be the dream as a collector like I am. But hopefully you have gathered a few interesting facts from this video. Hopefully it will help you towards you know, growing as a collector, maybe even as an investor, finding the right thing for you and not, you know, getting burned when buying something. It's never easy. And someday I will make a video about all the times I got burned when trying to buy records. I think it will be pretty funny. Anyway, this was all for this week. Next week I might do a collector's guide or maybe an update on the market for certain records. It's up to you. Just tell me in the comments which one you would like more. Anyway, this was Rare Japanese Sounds. As always, I hope that you've enjoyed the video, and until next time, stay tuned.